Okay, so the last in the last session we looked into the architecture, right? So we understood like there is a shared resource broker pattern. And when we look at the organizational boundary between the customer side and the publisher side, we see three arrows going from the left to the middle, right? We see the ARM deployment interacting with Key Vault and with a REST API. So retrieving the Bootstrap secret from Key Vault, using the Bootstrap secret to talk to the REST API, and then fetching the actual service principal back from Key Vault, storing it in the Key Vault at the customer side, and then the virtual machine using the service principal credential to talk to the endpoint. So these three interactions need to be configured, these connection strings, so to say, or endpoints, need to be configured in the ARM deployment's zip file for Marketplace as well. So inside the managed up folder, there is this metering configuration JSON, and in here we need to understand like what is the service principal creation URL, what is the publisher vault, and what is the AMQP endpoint down here. So these three values, with the publisher vault being a tuple of subscription resource group vault and secret, these in total 6 values need to be configured inside the JSON file as well. But we don't do this by hand. We do this via a script. So in my system here, I just start the file and basically put all these values in here. Denote everything with an XXX. And we are now going to run the setup inside the scripts shared resource broker folder. So we go to scripts and metering shared resource broker. And inside here is a setup.sh file. Or if you do this for the very first time, if you haven't yet worked with managed applications, I suggest you first run the create appliance resource provider script first. So this one here effectively calls the provider registration for Microsoft.solutions. This is necessary so that the appliance resource provider, the entity which taps into the Key Vault at the publisher side, is created properly. Once this is done, that might take a couple of minutes until it is visible, we can run our setup script. So let's do this. /setup.sh, and that's about it. And this command now tells us we need to configure deployment settings in a config.json file. For whatever reason, this is not visible here, but when I can I refresh this? I tried this recently. Let's do it differently. Let's just fire off code in here again. Sometimes the VS Code instance doesn't see that there is a file system change in the underlying Windows subsystem for Linux. So, but now that should be here. So, here's our config file. And this config file is the place where you configure all the data which we need to start running the script. Let me actually delete these files here. Delete that file and delete that file. These are from a previous run. We don't need these. So, what is our subscription ID? Let's have a look in. Let me move this in here. So, let's go to the resource groups, or let's go to the subscriptions. So this is the ISV, the publisher subscription, which is that one. So put in the subscription ID in here, The region where we deploy is Northern Europe. The resource group name is metered billing accelerator 24 January the 15th. The seed is metered billing 24/01/15. So now these two values here specify the security group where all these service principals are put in that represent a managed application, a deployed running application. So managed app service principal, managed app, let's call this just short as well, and managed application service principals 2014/01/15, like that. I do not use Azure App Insights, and this setup script will now do the whole, well, it will do the whole setup for us. Let's just briefly look on the ISV backend. It will create a key vault for us. It will configure this key vault for template deployments. It will slap in a bootstrap secret and a notification secret. The bootstrap secret, as said already, is the one to authenticate calls to the REST API. The notification secret is something which will be used by Azure to inform our backend when applications get deleted, so we can also delete the service principal in our backend. We have user-assigned managed identities in here. That managed identity can enumerate secrets. It's a secrets officer. This is the role-based access assignment where we say that the appliance resource provider is a contributor on our publisher key vault. So this is the magic, the little trick basically by which managed applications at the customer side can read secrets from that particular key vault at the publisher side. Then App Insights, our app service plan. We are using here an S1, a standard SKU, and our app service, so to say. And that's all the bits and pieces here. So let's run this. Let's see what else do we know. So we are done from a configuration perspective. So let's run our cd scripts and then metered, and then run our setup.sh again. And now, while this process is going through, so it identified the subscription, our tenant, it is creating a group with a given display name, so we can basically follow along in the portal and have a look about what's going on. So let's have a look at Entra. In the group section, we now should be seeing the new group. So here is our managed application service principals 2014. That group has a certain ID, an object ID like B81F something. And the interesting thing is, like, these values will also be added over time by the script to our config.json. So for example, the group ID is now also part of our configuration.json file over here, and also secret value for the notification secret, for example, because we will need this secret subsequently ourselves. So all these values basically show up in config.json over time, and now the template deployment is running. The result of the template deployment will also be written to the file system. So if anything goes wrong during the deployment, we can have a deeper look in this folder inside the metering shared resource broker folder to see what happened or where something went wrong, just in case. So let's have a look at the resource groups. Here is our metered billing accelerator resource group from the 15th of January. And in here we can now see a bunch of resources already being created. For example, the key vault, the app service for the REST endpoint, and also a service principal. So this one is interesting. Like, this service principal generator needs to be authorized in Azure AD to create service principals. So this is, so to say, a very powerful managed identity. So we can, let's see what's going on here furthermore. So the template deployment went through. So we can have a look at the output from here. That went for like 50 seconds. Bunch of resources have been created. It gives us various outputs, like, managed identities, the names of various resources which do now exist. Exactly. So let's double check again what's now inside this resource group. So inside the resource group, we have not only the part from our shared resource broker, which are these bits and pieces here, but also these other three resources. So we do have our event hub, we have the storage account, and we have the managed identity for the shared resource broker. So these entities are basically the ones which will fuel the shared resource broker itself. So let's, for example, have a look at the event hub namespace, for example. I want to see what's inside event hub. So I go down inside the event hub namespace to event hubs and have a look. And there should be some metering thing, exactly. So let's look at this event hub instance, and in particular at the access controls for this one. And inside the role assignments, we can see that, hopefully, exactly. So we can see that the managed application service principals group is an event hub sender. If you think back to the architecture picture, all these sending applications are sending into event hub, right? So they can publish there. And the identity for the billing accelerator itself is not only a sender, but an owner. Why that? Because it can not only send via this feedback loop here, but it can also read from the event stream. So these are the permissions for the metered billing accelerator. Or if we just look at a different resource, for example, it's a storage account. Inside the storage account, we do have a couple of containers. For example, the most important one for us is the snapshots container. The snapshots container is, so to say, the database, if you like, for our shared resource broker. And I'm not a data owner, but I can look here at the permissions. And inside the role assignments, I can see that the metered billing accelerator is also a blob data contributor because it can read and write. This is effectively like this part here of the picture where the yellow component is reading and writing from the state snapshots. So last but not least, let's have a quick look at the app service plan. There should be a zip deploy running. So inside the template or inside the deployment script, if I go to the setup script here, the deployment, it pointed here to a zip URL, and in this case it's pointing to a concrete release inside GitHub of an x86 64-bit binary of the shared resource brokers. So if everything works well, then this plan, we should be able to see, where is the endpoint? No, this is a plan. I need to look at the app service. Looking at the app service, if everything works well, we should be seeing a Swagger endpoint up here. So let's try that one. It's now booting the application for the very first time. This is the first call ever hitting the endpoint here. So this certainly takes a couple of seconds to get caches warm and whatnot. And it says it's complaining about the bitness. Okay, let's check that one. Let's go to the configuration. And in the general settings, okay, so this is on .NET 7. Let's bump this up to .NET 8. And let's bump up the bitness to 64-bit and save the whole thing. And this should give us, it should give us a proper Swagger endpoint. And I need to still see how I can tweak the ARM template to show the proper, to directly have the correct .NET 8 and 64-bit thing here. Okay, and here we can now see our Swagger endpoint does now have a create service principal endpoint where we can create service principals and where we can, call other methods on. So that's great, and this is ending that part of the video in which we deployed all the contents necessary, all the infrastructure, so to say, necessary for the shared resource broker.